people know I'm starting YouTube streaming.
Okay.
You're getting new people.
And a couple that we used to have a long time ago are coming back.
I like the little camera yet?
Sure.
I heard his name mentioned last week, yeah. Very talented. Yeah.
Didn't know.
That's my third time, I really enjoyed it.
It's so nice to be here in person and
Yes.
I think I started early. Come on, dude. Is that one of those gag candles? I wonder.
The wick got burned all the way down, so I don't think there's anything to latch onto there.
Yeah, they're either long or short, I guess.
Hey, let's hold the candle sideways to start with.
10:29. What do you?
Wow. Try a red one.
I saw you on the camera last week on the TV. Oh. Yeah, were you sick? Looks like these are all.
That one's going.
There we go. Third time.
All right, now we can ding the ball, I think. Oh, no, we got a minute. We got
I
a
guess
minute.
that means if it goes out after you do your joy and concern, that it's all dealt with.
Yes.
It's all handled. The universe is taking care of it.
Books don't need taken?
No, books do not need.
Oh, okay, all right.
No, you're good.
Bad place.
Exactly.
I know there's a question I had for you, but
Isn't that cute?
10:30.
Good morning, Kurt.
Oh, yes. Barbara,
Kel, you wanna?
sorry. Remember. Yeah, okay. What am I doing? Oh, the ball. It's been a long time for me too.
Please join us in singing the welcome song. Kathleen will play it first.
Yes, I will play through it. It's a song we've done once, but the words are up on the screen. We sing it 3 times through. So here's the melody. Here we go.
Spirit is alive, living thing. Spirit is alive in me. We are one, we are one, we are one, we are one. Living from this truth, when we are living proof, all its resonance and light. We are one, we are one, we Good morning. Welcome to Dakota UU Church. My name is Chuck, and my pronouns are he, him. We welcome all guests, members, folks online over there. We don't pass a basket or offering plate on Sunday morning, but there's a little basket back there. And we'd love it if you feel so moved to contribute to the vitality of this congregation. We try to keep the service to 1 hour, but sometimes we go a little over. But if you have obligations, you need to leave at 10:30. We don't keep any hostages. Today we are lucky to have Shelly Dugan back with us, and I'm interested in her talk today. Was there anybody want to reflect anything about the drumming on Friday night? We had about, what, 7 people? Something like that?
It was 9.
9?
Yeah,
10.
10 counting me.
Yes.
I will say that
I was
just from
very-
my experience of doing
I hear
drumming
11,
in the
12,
community.
here 12.
Oops,
I'm sorry.
sorry. Is that drumming as a group builds community, helps to build community.
It was fun.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was really good.
It was fun,
We all
yeah.
really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
Great. As you could tell by the announcements that I'm doing, and also if you see the announcements on our MailChimp mailing, there's a lot of vitality, a lot of things going on in this church, and I think that's cool. And if you have anything you want in the announcements, or I've had this idea, if you want to write a little commentary about something that would be appropriate for the church, you can send it to me and I could include this week's commentary in the MailChimp or whatever. So Barbara May is offering a book discussion on the book 8 Ways to Hope, and the last sessions are Tuesday, March 4th and 18th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. It's on Zoom. Is that right?
Potentially, we may change the 18th, but yes,
Oh.
the next
To
one
the
is March
11th.
4th.
It might be, March 4th was the next one. The one after that might be the 11th
be
or the
determined.
18th. Yeah. And 6:30, and it's on Zoom. Use the same Zoom link as the Sunday service. Next Sunday, Brian is back with a talk called The Celebration in the Midst of Chaos and Uncertainty. And Dawn Gateke has offered to be our service leader for March, which is awesome. Any comments or reflections on the retreat we had yesterday?
I do.
Yes, Alice.
It was incredibly uplifting, you guys.
Yes.
You
So
know,
many people came.
yes, and just new faces and new energy and new ideas. And, you know, I've been looking at you, Kathy, and you, Chuck, and Jim and Kelly and Deb for all these months, you know, our council. And we desperately needed you all. And so thank you for coming and
Yeah.
being there.
Kelly and I mentioned yesterday that there was disagreement, which is cool because a lot of things people just either don't speak or they just say not along in agreement, and we don't usually have disagreement, but we had disagreement, but it was respectful. It's like, I don't know, I don't think we should do that, I think we should do this.
And we could get through,
Yeah.
you know, to a different place.
Yeah, so that was awesome.
We had a lot of productive conversations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And it's recorded, but it's not available for public, like on YouTube or whatever, but it might be available to members that weren't there somehow to, maybe,
I have to post it on YouTube to make it.
make it a private,
I
yeah,
have to make it a private video on YouTube and give the link out.
yeah. Well, yeah, if you're interested in seeing that and you weren't able to be there, we can make that happen, I suppose, I think. All right.
Was someone taking minutes?
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Copious minutes.
copious.
Yes, that's her middle name now.
If those could get sent out,
Yeah.
then we
Yes.
appreciate it.
Okay, let's see. And we're still looking for volunteers to be a security plan committee. And also, we're looking for a new treasurer for the coming year. And thanks to Alice for being treasurer for a long, long time. And remember to sign up for treats online.
And I have a sign-up sheet here today that I can pass around.
Yeah, there we go. And there will be an OWL, Our Whole Lives facilitator training at FUS, First Unitarian Society, in April, and Kelly has the information for that. Any other announcements? Kathy?
Yeah, we have a greeter meeting on March 8th.
Sounds right.
That sounds right. At 10 o'clock at my house. Anybody else who is interested in maybe taking a turn at greeting is welcome to come. Just give me a call and we'll put you on the list.
That's the day of your concert, too.
Saturday,
Oh, I'm sorry. So it's the 7th.
I'm like, boy, you got a full day.
March 7th, Friday, 10 a.m. at my place. Thank you. That's
makes
right.
more sense.
Yes. Well, and then segue into our WOW group, Wells of Wisdom, is going to be on March 8th attending my concert
Yes,
in the
got it.
afternoon. And that's at 3:30 at, I can't remember the name, Westwood Church in St. Louis Park. And it's Bella Lumina. We are doing the suffrage cantata. And it's amazing and sadly very relevant for our times, though we are talking historically about things that happened 100 years ago. So, but it's all very still relevant. Yeah, and it's amazing.
And there's a link on the MailChimp, you can get the tickets and information.
Sure. $20 online ahead of time only.
Awesome. Well, let's settle ourselves and take a deep breath and put away all the outside world chaos and listen to this musical prelude. We have these opening words. It's a responsive reading adapted from the song Ancient Words by Michael W. Smith. I'm going to stay seated so you can see the screen. As part of our faith traditions, we look to ancient words from timeless texts written with human communities around the earth as sources of wisdom and teaching.
Tales of contextual truths, stories of faith, we honor their origins and receive their lessons with open hearts and with informed minds.
Precious words handed down to this age, often through sacrifice and with the commitment to educating and enlightening future generations.
Impart to us that which can change us in ways that give hope and resolve, so that
that we can meet the challenges of an ever-changing world.
Ancient words, studied, interpreted, and applied with love, offering strength and courage to bring positive change for our local and global communities.
We honor so many traditions that look to change us, embolden us, and empower us to foster an ongoing, evolving vision of a world full of peace, justice, joy, hope, and love, changing us even as we work to bring change that emancipates, that liberates, and that moves us all forward.
Therefore, in the spirit of ancient words that inspire us, we light this chalice together and say,
May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers, to heal with love, to help with compassion, to bless with joy, to serve you, Spirit of freedom, in the fullness of community.
Please rise as you are able, and we are going to sing our first hymn, which is number 20, and I think the words will also be on the screen. Be thou my vision.
20.
All right, I'll just give an intro and then.
Now's the time that we share each week an item of beloved community or beloved community moment. Just as love knows no borders, our dedication to justice reaches across boundaries and walls. We show up on the side of love with all families regardless of citizenship status and strive to create welcoming communities and congregations. We organize and advocate for immigration reform and for an end to detentions and deportations, and for a world where hands are extended in peace and care across borders, and no one feels forced to leave home or risk death in pursuit of a decent life for their family. We affirm immigration as a moral issue, and have long spoken out in support of immigration justice. We are a sanctuary congregation. We work to give resources to provide safe spaces for those under threat. People of faith and conscience are expanding what it means to offer sanctuary, to include not only physical sanctuary, but also sanctuary policies and sanctuary campuses and sanctuary community support networks. Therefore, as Dakota is definitely a music and poetic congregation, I offer these poetic lyrics that are meant to affirm our support of those who have and are migrating to safer and more promising lands. Kelly will read these words by Yancey M. Barnwell. Would you harbor me?
Would you harbor me? Would I harbor you? Would you harbor me? Would I harbor you? Would you harbor a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, a heretic, convict, or spy? Would you harbor a runaway woman, a child, a poet, a prophet, a king? Would you harbor an exile or a refugee, a person living with AIDS? Would you harbor a Tubman, a Garrett, a Truth, a fugitive, or a slave? Would you harbor a Haitian, Korean, or Ukrainian, a lesbian, gay, or trans person? Would you harbor me? Would I harbor you? Would you harbor me? Would I harbor you?
May it be so. Blessed be. And now is the time we set aside each week for the sharing of joys and concerns. If you have a joy or concern and would like to light a candle and share your joy or concern, or you can light one in silence if you prefer. If anybody online has a joy or concern, just unmute and we will light a candle for you.
We'll see if I get a candle that lights.
Yes.
They've apparently been a little finicky today. So for those whom I haven't met yet, I'm Shelly. I'm your guest speaker today. And I've quite a long history with this congregation. Mm-hmm. And I am, yay, it's staying lit. I like this and joy because I am delighted to be here. I always love coming to be here with this congregation. And also because I have a chance to make some amends today. And I am very thankful for that because people are important to me, some people especially. So I am just really glad to be here and glad that you folks are here. Thank you.
This is probably both joy and concern. I got some genetic testing done, and apparently I literally have a worry gene. Like, it's a thing. So it's literally in my DNA.
I wouldn't worry about it. Oh, was that recorded?
That was recorded. He's right, though. You're absolutely right. Just gonna say, I bet he has one too. And you. But apparently, yeah.
Well, I have a progress report.
Ask me again.
This evening or late this afternoon, I move into a hotel for at least a week, vacating my house so that they can continue working on my itty bitty fire that apparently has caused a whole lot more damage than I realized. They've taken down cupboards in my kitchen. They've ripped up the carpet in the living room. They're going to have to seal the walls and then repaint them. And it's quite a bit more than I had anticipated. So anyway, hopefully my house will be back in order sometime relatively soon. And so that's my progress report.
I just want to say I'm happy to see Megan and Bill and Kitty down in Florida and Sherry all online.
Yes.
Hope you guys are having a good winter down there, Merrill's.
Hello? Hello. Yes,
Yeah,
Kitty.
Bill.
Hi. Yes, we are having a great time down here and it is sunny and warm. So we're thinking of you and we're here.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you.
That's for Bill and Kitty. All right, Kathy.
I have a concern for my friend Cindy, who is, not my friend Cindy, my friend Ann, who is kind of in and out of the hospital right now, and hopefully some things get figured out. And a joy and kind of an update. A lot of you know that the McCowans and Jim and I joined with a team of people from First Unitarian Society and Minnesota Valley to host a Ukrainian family. And our family is doing fabulously. They're now independent. They moved down to Nevada last fall, Las Vegas. And they came back for a visit, and so we got to get together last night and see them and just see how great they're doing, and it's awesome.
And celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary.
Yes.
I'd like to light a candle, just for all the vibrancy of this community, and with the drumming on, oh, just killed the one that I tried to light off of. With the drumming on Friday and the retreat yesterday, and getting together with your Ukrainian family last night, it's been a busy weekend, but just very joyful and affirming. So appreciate that.
And Emily comes tonight.
Emily comes tonight. That's another joy. Are there any others, or I'll light a final candle? Okay, I light this final candle for all the joys and concerns that remain unspoken, but in our hearts. May we know that whatever happens to us in our lives, we are held in the loving embrace of this community. And we say together,
We hold you in our hearts.
And, you know, it's still in my mind that after we say that, the children may now go to their organized activities.
That's been a while.
It's been a long time, but it's still in there. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Shelly Dugan to come speak with us, and I'm really excited to hear what she has to say about the Bible, because I've had my own problems and challenges with that. So.
Yes. Well, first, Bob has some readings for
Right.
us. And it's great having your own voice actors as a husband who can do the readings.
From Judges, chapter 12. Gilead captured the fords of the Jordan at the crossing to Ephraim. If an Ephraimite fugitive said, "Let me cross," the men of Gilead would say, "Are you an Ephraimite?" And he would say, "No." And they would say, "Say Shibboleth." But he would always say, Sibboleth. He couldn't say it right. Then they would grab him and kill him there at the fords of the Jordan. 42 Ephraimite divisions were killed on that occasion. From Mark chapter 9. "Teacher," said John, "we saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we told him to stop, because he was not one of us." "Do not stop him," Jesus said. "For no one who does a miracle in my name can in the next moment say anything bad about me. For whoever is not against us is for us. Truly, I tell you, anyone who gives you a cup of water in my name because you belong to the Messiah will certainly not lose their reward." And from 2 Timothy chapter 3. "All Scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness, that the people of God may be complete, equipped for every good work.
I have to be smarter than the music stand. Here we go. In my work as a chaplain, I often get asked two questions. And there are times when people need to ask me these things before they're comfortable with my ministering to them. So sometimes they will ask me about Jesus, and sometimes they will ask me about the Bible. And they are looking for some very specific answers. And if I get verbose, or if I start to equivocate, or if I start to get explaining, I've lost them. They are looking for some very specific things. And when they ask me about the Bible, they want to hear me say inspired, inerrant, infallible, and the Word of God. I've had to figure out how to respond to these people in a way that will allow me to minister to them and yet also keep integrity with my own faith. Fortunately, as a UU minister, I know some things about how the Bible was put together and how to read it, and I can say all those things and still feel good about saying them. Now, I want to start by just acknowledging that talking about the Bible itself can be really difficult, and it can bring up a lot of emotions because it is such a double-edged sword. It has caused tremendous harm, and it's also done a lot of healing. It's a really complex topic. So this morning, if it seems like I'm taking a Gregorian knot and explaining it to you like a square knot, that's about what I'm doing. I'm trying to simplify something that isn't really simple. But the Bible's kind of like a crazy quilt. And each square is its own thing. Before the Bible became the Bible, there were all these religious books that were floating out in the world. People were reading them. And each one was complete literary work in and of itself. It was a book. It stood alone. And over time, that book became valued, it became known, and people thought it was precious. So think about classic literature today. Nobody really sat down and made this huge list about what's classical literature. It wasn't really done by committee, but more by common consent. I mean, we have things from the Odyssey to Beowulf to Pride and Prejudice to Catcher in the Rye. And if you think about books that are just exceptional, they're in a category all by themselves. There's something special about them. And I want to take just a second and ask you folks to just call out, what are your favorite books? What are
Sweetgrass.
Okay, so what are they? What are your favorite? And if you talk over each other, that's
Shakespeare's plays.
Okay, Shakespeare's plays. What else?
Little Women.
Okay.
Kill a Mockingbird.
Kill a Mockingbird. You said one, Kelly?
Braiding Sweetgrass.
Oh, yes, that's gorgeous. Okay.
Great Gatsby. Great Gatsby.
Okay.
100 Years of Solitude.
Ooh, good one.
Yes.
Angela's Ashes.
Yes. So these books are like in a category that are different, aren't they? Mm-hmm. There's just something special about them. And with the exception of Anna Karenina, anytime I have read a classical book, afterwards I have finished it and I have said, wow, now I know why this is a special book. And there's something different about a book that's been on the bestseller New York Times list for 24 weeks and a book that people have been reaching back to for hundreds of years. they're classics. And people can just recognize that they are classics. We think of them as inspired. Inspired means God-breathed. It doesn't mean dictated. It doesn't mean transcribed, and it doesn't mean channeled by God. It means that they have a certain life in them. So, back before the days of the printing press, think about how much work it was to copy a book. If there was something that you really liked, there were two ways to transmit that story, and one was by oral history, or the other was to copy that book. And either way was a lot of work. And if you ever got in trouble in school and had to copy a page in the dictionary, did anybody ever have to do that?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so a few of us have had to do that. It was pretty grueling. Think about copying a book. And first it's just getting the materials, making the parchment or the paper, or making the ink. And there weren't any great, nice roller gel pens that felt good in your hand. There were these quills that had the nub cut off that you dipped into refillable ink pots, and you scratched the letters into the parchment or the paper. So doing these books was really laborious, and it was expensive. And so books weren't copied generally unless people really liked them, unless they really mattered. So in ancient times, there became some religious books that started floating around. And in about the 2nd century BCE, the Jews informally got together, and they, by common consent, not by a committee, came up with the books that they put together in the Old Testament. It's like, here are our classics. Here's the stuff that we recognize is a cut above the other religious books out there. And that's how they decided on what went in the Old Testament. And they divided it into 3 different scrolls. There was instruction, prophets, and writing. Well, religious books and letters continued to be written. Stories about Jesus and other spiritual figureheads, and theological treatises and instructions to religious groups, and explaining about the origin of people and things. More oral stories were passed down. And people got together again and agreed on what would make up the Christian scriptures. It wasn't done by a committee. Now, later on, a committee did decide to okay it, put the rubber stamp on it, because it's religion and you've got to have committees. But it wasn't until 367 that the Bishop of Alexandria actually wrote down, here are all the books, 66 books altogether, that were in the Old and the New Testament, that were agreed upon by everybody. So it was more by common consent. And these are the books that the early Christians decided these are worth our time and our money to have copied and continued. The names given to the book were not necessarily the authors. It was often just a handy way to refer to them. The chapters and the verses that we see, those things were added later, just as a way to make things handy. And sometimes if you're reading through the Bible, you think, why in the world did they do a split here? Good question, but they did, and it was just more because it had gotten so unwieldy. How else would you refer to something? The New Testament also ended up grouping these books according to genre. So there's the Gospels, and those are the stories about Jesus' life. There's historical books about the early life of the church. Letters of instruction to the churches, and those are called epistles. And then there's a category that's called the Book of Vision or Revelation, and that's apocryphal. And the Catholic Bible is different than the Protestant Bible, and it has a bunch of additional apocryphal literature, and that is a whole other sermon. So I will save that for some other day. Today we're just going to talk about the Protestant Bible. Sometimes, if you're standing in the line at the grocery store, or perhaps you're flipping through a magazine, you'll see an ad that will say that for just $29.95, you can have a copy of the Lost Gospels. And it's presented in such a way as though there were these malicious, conniving church leaders who kept these secret Gospels away from you because they didn't want you to know the truth. Well, actually, those are just the ones that didn't make the cut. That's why they aren't in the Bible. The most famous one is probably the Gospel of Thomas. And I'll tell you, it's more action-packed and it's got more miracles. It just wasn't as credible. Like Jesus, when he was a little boy, he made this bird out of mud and he turned it into life and it flew away. Or he got ticked off at one of his little friends and he struck him dead. And then he felt bad and he raised him from the dead. So a lot more excitement, but people just didn't think it had quite the gravitas as the other Gospels did, and it didn't make the cut. So it's not as though somebody is keeping these from you. It didn't make the cut into the classic literature that everyone thought, here's the really good stuff. If you read the 4 Gospels in the New Testament, and gospel, by the way, means good news, you'll notice that there are a lot of differences. And that's as it should be. Think about if there are 4 people and they all see an accident, and you ask them to describe what they see. Well, they'll kind of say the same thing, and they'll also have a lot of differences in their story. If those 4 people tell you exactly the same thing, you're going to know that they all collaborated, and you are not going to believe them. So the fact that these are 4 different points of view actually lends credibility. It doesn't mean that there's a big mistake here. And that's a really great entry into the whole idea of inerrancy. Because there are folks that are really happy to point out all the mistakes that there are in the Bible. Well, the problem doesn't lie in the fact that there's all these mistakes. It's usually a problem of reading the books in the Bible in ways that they were not meant to be read, and asking them to be what they were not. So think about a newspaper. So ideally a newspaper, here's something that's going to give you some versions of the truth. But you don't read the advice column the same way that you read the headlines, or the same way that you read the human interest stories, or the same way that you read the sports page, or the funnies, or each piece of the paper is a different genre, and you read it accordingly. And you don't demand that they all read exactly the same, but yet you're willing to accept that they each have something to tell you, even though it's done in a very different manner. So it's the same way with each of the books of the Bible. And Bible, by the way, comes from the Greek word books, plural. Basically, it's an anthology. It's a bunch of books that were agreed that, yeah, here are the classics, and we're going to put them together in some groups. These are the ones we like. But let me give you an example about reading things in a way that makes sense. So Genesis chapters 1 and 2. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It's not a history book. It's not science. It's a poem. If you look at the cadence, the repetition, it's a poem. And not only is it a poem, quite specifically, it's a polemic. So when it was written, there were all these myths about how the world came to be. And the most famous was the Imuna Elish. And that was a Mesopotamian myth. And they believed that there were all these gods, the good and bad, and they all fought. And then the god Marduk won, and Marduk took the body of the evil god, and Marduk made that the basis of the earth. And Genesis came along, and it's a poem, and it says, no, Yahweh created the earth. None of this silly fighting. None of this making another god's body the ground. God did it. And that's the whole point. It does not cancel out evolution. It doesn't actually even try to tell us the order in which the world is made. The whole point of it is just to say, Yahweh created the world. It's a poem. That makes it different, doesn't it? If you think about it that way. It's a gorgeous poem, I think. And when I watch those Nova documentaries about how the earth is put together, I have no trouble believing that there is some power bigger than me at work in the universe. And that's just pure poetry. Another thing about the Bible is that in the 21st century, we have a very particular way of understanding history. It's linear. We might have a few little tangents, poking off to try and understand something because of influences. So maybe we might look outside that basic plot line. And we have precise dates and we have precise numbers. And we're also very much rugged individualists in our Western culture. We're self-made people. Well, you know what? The Bible wasn't really written for us, although we'd kind of like to think that it all revolves around us. But it was also written for other cultures as well. History, in the way that we understand history, is not in the Bible. That isn't how they did history. And in many parts of the world, even today, you are not a person until you can tell everybody where you came from. Whose kid are you? Whose grandkid are you? Whose great, 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 great grandchild are you? Where did you come from? And those are the begats. So if you look into the Bible, for example, in, which one is it? In Matthew, Jesus' royal heritage is emphasized. And so there's 14 generations, from Abraham to David, from David to the Babylonian exile, from the Babylonian exile to Christ. And in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus' lineage is traced back through Mary, back to Adam, emphasizing sort of his everyman status. But in order to prove, yes, this is a real person and here are all the relatives, and that mattered enough that people were willing to pay the money to have all those begats copied out. And in other parts of the world today, unless you can say who you belong to, people don't want to hear from you. In the West, we don't do that, but we aren't the only ones around. We can trust what the Bible has to say, provided we read it the way it was intended. We have to look at the genre, the wordplay, the context, the focus of the passage. And then we'll find that the Bible's accurate within that particular format. If we try to turn it into something else, something that it isn't, it'll seem full of errors. And if we try to read it according to 21st century standards, we can find all the errors we want. So handling the text with integrity is required. And one of the things that does is it frees us from having to prove anything about the Bible. I don't have to prove that it's a science book or that the history is accurate. And it's not a magic book. So if you have gotten into the habit of, say, taking a Bible and opening it up and going boom, and that's my word for the day, you can do that with any book, and you'll probably get the same results. Because that's not how the Bible gives direction to people. It does it in a much, much larger and much more complicated format and context. If you want to point at any book and get a word or a sentence for the day and then interpret that, I think there are various spiritual and psychological things at work that you can get something out of it. But it's not because the Bible is magic that it would do that. And the Bible is not full of all sorts of secret codes and hidden conspiracies. Because remember, people would not spend the time and money to have these books copied down if it didn't make sense to them. So if it was all sorts of secret stuff that doesn't matter, they aren't going to do that. One of the really unique things about the Bible is that it's not sugar-coated. When you look at the histories about the Hebrew people, it's almost as if the Bible goes out of the way to show you how very human and fallible they are. If you look at the literature of other societies of that time, if a king didn't win a battle, that battle wasn't recorded. You only find out about it by the other king who did win. But in the Christian Bible, and also the Old Testament, it goes out of its way to say, here are the ways that people were so fallible and messy, and here's their wisdom, and here's their warts, and here's the ways they were just kind of stupid. And think about classical literature. People are messy, and they're complicated, and it challenges us, and we can relate to them far better than if there's some caricature of something perfect. So in this way, it's much more relatable. Numbers are handled differently. If I say to you, he was 10 feet tall, am I lying to you? No. You know exactly what I mean. You know that I mean that he was really tall, like Bob. But you understand what I mean, right? And we talk about 6 of one and half a dozen of another, and, you know, maybe I'm batting 1,000. We use numbers in all sorts of ways. Well, they did the same thing in the Bible. And so if we try to use all the numbers literally, sometimes it doesn't make sense. It's nonsensical. But if we understand that they also use numbers figuratively, it's more meaningful. So a great example is the number 40. And if you think about how often you hear the number 40, 40 generally means complete or whole. So the great flood, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And Goliath taunted the Israelites for 40 days. And the palace was built so that it was 40 cubits long. And Jesus fasted in the desert for 40 days. And the Israelites wandered around the desert for 40 years. 40, 40, 40, 40, 40. You keep seeing that over and over and over. The idea is wholeness, completeness. sort of our idea of in the fullness of time. Now, maybe it means 40 in the literal sense, but that really doesn't matter. The point is, it happened completely as it was supposed to happen. Or it was built completely as it was supposed to be built. And other numbers, 3, 7, 12, 40, and 12 times 12, are all numbers that we know are often used figuratively, in the same way that we have numbers that we use figuratively. And if we try and impose literal numbers on them, it's easy to say, see, there's a mistake. That's crazy. That doesn't make sense. But if you think of it in terms of, no, it's a phrase, then it makes a lot more sense. And finally, let me talk about infallibility. And that's the idea that the Bible can't make mistakes, that it's not misleading. That contradictions can be resolved. Because it does say different things, doesn't it? Well, one of the ways to deal with this idea is theology. And the Bible uses what I call progressive theology. For example, when you start in the Old Testament, God's a jerk. You know, mean and angry and violent and jealous, not very nice. And then by the time you get to the New Testament, Jesus is calling God Abba, which is like daddy. Well, when monotheism is introduced, first you just got to make people understand that this is a God. And that's what the gods were back then. They weren't very nice. But then as the Bible progresses, we see that the personality of God begins to change. Something that might be a little closer to my own heart is how the Bible talks about women. So there are places in the Bible where women don't count. We are chattel. We should be obedient. We should remain silent. Bob will tell you I don't do well. And yet we also come across women prophets and leaders and pastors of churches. Again, it has to do with context and what are we reading? What is the context of the passage? So before pointing fingers and saying, see, it's wrong, it's important to take in the context, both of the passage and then of the much larger picture. The social customs as well as what is the progressive theology that we're being taught. In the Old Testament, homosexuality is a sin and an abomination. In the New Testament, Jesus blesses and seeks out now I'm going to get my initials all messed up. LBGTQ folks. There we go. I have dyslexia. It gets messy. But one of my favorite passages is when a Roman centurion comes to Jesus and he says, would you heal my precious servant? Well, in the language of that day, precious servant was basically a way of saying, my lover. And Jesus says, sure. And this guy is a Roman. He's not even a Jew. And yet he's coming to Jesus and asking, would you heal my lover? And Jesus says, absolutely, not a problem. And Jesus says, let's go to your house. And the guy says, you don't even have to. You can just say the word. He'll be healed. And Jesus is impressed with the guy's faith. Or, right before the Passover, Jesus says to his disciples, go into town and find the man that's carrying the jar of water and follow him to that house and tell the owner of that house that we're going to have the Passover dinner there. Well, for the man to be carrying that jar of water, that's actually woman's work back in that day. And Jesus might have just as easily said, go into town and find the guy wearing the dress. But they were all wearing dresses. But here's the guy doing woman's work. And Jesus says, follow him. Go to that house and say, that's where we're going to have the Last Supper. Did you know that? That's kind of cool, isn't it? I like that. It's nice to know some of those little ins and outs. One final complication is that we are dealing with translations. And translations don't just translate words, they also translate theology. So a really great example is the word deacon. And we understand the word deacon is a leader in the church. And in many, many translations, when deacon is associated with men, it's translated as deacon. When it's associated with women, it's often translated as helper or servant. And unfortunately, in some translations, Romans 16 and 1 Timothy 3, it will sometimes translate as deacon's wife, making it even further. So you can see that the people who did the translation were not comfortable with the idea of women being leaders. And so they just chose a different word for how they translated it. When I was in seminary, I used to do translations. I did translations from Greek into English. And it was so easy to see the different theologies between myself and my other classmates, what we believed depending on how we translated a passage. The other thing is we do not translate the Bible, we paraphrase it. And if we're looking at the King James translation, we're looking at a very, very old paraphrase as well. I really like the Bible. I like it more now as a UU than I do when I was in a very far-right fundamental group. And there's something that is both so special and so ordinary about the Bible. It's not a channeled transcription, but it is a timeless work with life in it. It's trustworthy, provided that it's handled with integrity and read according to its proper genre and context. And it's not trying to mislead us or lie to us, but we do need to handle it carefully, with honesty. I'm a serious theologian and I'm a careful scholar, and reason and mystery are important to me. And for those fearful patients and families that I talked about that need to know I'm safe, I can assure them that the Bible is inspired, inerrant, infallible, the Word of God. And as a good UU, I can also say that the universe is full of inerrant, inspired, infallible words from the divine. Amen and amen. And understand we have a bit of music before we do dialogue?
Yeah, and I don't think we'll have time to do dialogue, but we'll have the special music and then we'll do our closing hymn.
And we can chat during.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can chat during if people want.
Wow.
Thank you.
So we have a closing hymn, which is number 281.
Okay, so three verses, we'll get it all done, we're a little over, but that's okay. So, oh wait, I'm on the wrong, oh, geez. Get the right book. Okay, all right, I'll do an intro here.
Rise.
There's five verses, right?
Shelly has some words of sending insight, and then you can stick around just a little bit. We have a postlude after that.
It is written in the Torah, I call heaven and earth to witness today that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life that you and your descendants may live. Blessed be.
Yeah, you can chat if
You
you
can
want,
chat.
but
It's
this is
a very
an upbeat, fun,
upbeat-
you can get up and swing dance.
the scribes, they were making the original
I'm
copies.
not doing it for good
A
shape.
lot of the scribes were illiterate, and they were just copying the shapes of the. So no wonder there's differences in.
Weeks ago.
You know, the differences are actually
Wasn't
pretty
gonna be
small.
here, so I had to do this check yesterday.
Text.
I mean, it's just like, I think it's really automatic, you know.
Seriously, when we tried it, and then I did switch it into what we think it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll sit there a bit. But then there's Barbara, I forgot about
Yeah.
her, so.
The example he gave was that the word for camel is very similar to the word for rope.
Oh, for not
Yeah.
Yeah.
And said that makes more sense as an analogy than trying to fit a camel through that.
That's true.
But it's the same point, right?
It is the same, way to do it. And the other thing is, the truth is, we don't have anything that's immediate.
Right.
Before we even actually have
Written word. Yeah.
written words,
Right.
so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A variety today, a real variety.
Yes,
With all
quite a
different
variety,
directions.
and we had violin as well. It was very good.
Thank you.